Hello, Thielbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard, worldwide, greetings. This is part 2 of a talk titled Open Message to the Non-Feminist Women of the World. At the conclusion of part 1, I made the point that men are free to speak their minds harshly about women, and that I have no duty to correct them, but only to advise them in a political capacity that their rhetorical discipline could stand improvement. And I have made the point that I would never moralize about any of this. And that was where part 1 ended. All right. Since I am intending this for a female audience, I should steer the talk once more in a direction that sounds like I am speaking to women in particular. I have stressed that the force of male anger must be directed toward feminism as a movement and as an ideology, but I have not talked about the role that women ought to play in all of this, so I go now to make good on that omission. If we are to channel the force of male anger purely and narrowly against feminism, we must make it clear that feminist and female are distinctly separate things. The worst mind job that the feminists have hoisted upon the world is the hazily conceived mental folly that women and feminism are interchangeable terms. There are plenty of people, men and women both, who loosely harbor this idea or something close to it. In retrospect, one sees that the feminists have given men and women every possible inducement to be mutually hostile, and that their effort has been twofold. Firstly, they have conducted a massive smear campaign against the male population, both in order to turn women against men and to induce paranoia in men themselves. Secondly, they have procured advantages and special considerations for women while failing to hold women morally accountable in their new powers and freedoms. The synergism of these factors is deadly. Consider that feminism has not encouraged women to be morally introspective. Quite the contrary. The expression, "You go, girl," best epitomizes the character of feminist instruction to women. You will hear next to nothing on the theme of "You whoa, girl." As a study in contrast, such phrases as "stand by your man" or "do right by your man" are known to flow from the mouths of traditional conservative women. Their attitude is the sinews of civilization, by which I mean that it binds civilization together. It is not, however, what feminism encourages. Indeed, feminism has absolutely no reason to encourage the growth of moral intelligence among women at large, and every reason to encourage the opposite, and to blame men for the social dysfunctionality which follows. And feminism's void of edifying discourse melds seamlessly with the human proclivity to be lazy and venal. This proclivity is common to both men and women, but here the tendency is one-sidedly encouraged among the female population. Women are led to believe they can do no wrong, while men are potentially subjected to an adverse construction or negative transvaluation of any word or deed. It is small wonder, therefore, that a lot of men look at women in the aggregate and see an undifferentiated mass of complicit sheep at best, and feministically minded man-haters at worst. This makes a ripe breeding ground for misogynistic feeling. It generates a set of conditions that virtually guarantee the growth of such feeling. And under such conditions, you would ask too much to ask otherwise. Yes, under certain conditions, mildew will grow. Likewise, under certain conditions, misogyny will grow. Given the necessary conditions, both outcomes are predictable. remove the conditions, and the outcomes are evitable. Truly, there are many ways that a male person might learn quite rationally and justifiably within his own lights to distrust women, and from distrusting them to travel the slippery slope into the valley of still darker feelings. And so it ought to be our rational concern as a society to starve the process that would cause any man, or men generally, to evolve in such a way. But to teach women that they are not morally accountable to men can only stoke this boiler on a grand scale. And that is precisely what feminism does. The growth of ill feeling toward women is bound to occur if men perceive women in general to be acquiescent toward feminism and toward anti-male politics. And if female supremacist plans continue to unfold, as they appear set to do, this effect can only be the worse and can only accelerate as time goes on. Similarly, the growing political enlightenment of men about the nature of feminism can only undermine its own purpose if a corresponding enlightenment in tandem does not take place among women. The political enlightenment of women is imperative, because the absence of such a thing would only validate men's worst suspicions about women, and from this the alleged interchangeability of female and feminist would appear, in their minds, to be confirmed. To sum up, a political awakening of women about the nature of feminism must occur alongside the political awakening of men. For if it does not occur, then politically awakened men will conclude that most women are feminist by nature, and therefore as much the enemy as feminism itself. At that point, the death of the social contract will become impossible to ignore, and the objective conditions will spiral from bad to worse. Therefore, women must be brought on board as aggressive agitators against feminism. You see, the political awakening is merely the first step. They must also get loud about it. If overwhelming complicit silence from women is the only thing which men at the political vanguard believe themselves to be hearing, then in the long term they will feel justified in drawing unfavorable conclusions about the female population as a whole. And if that happens, only two significant outcomes may be predicted. The first is that civilization will collapse and a general pandemonium will follow in which women will fare worse than presently. The second is that men will act decisively to reclaim masculine power and prerogative before civilization collapses, but with a permanently soured and wised-up view of women. And again, women will fare the worse for it. You would think that any feminist would be keen to avoid either of the two scenarios sketched above. Yet, knowing them as I do, I would anticipate no support and no receptive hearing from any feminist for anything at all which I have stated. On the contrary, to speak in such a vein will set me, as I am only too well aware, in a politically troublesome light. Yet I feel duty-bound to frankness, for it would ill serve the world to discourse otherwise. Clearly, feminism will be no help and will cast no illumination in the troubled years ahead. Clearly, feminism must be swept out of the road with a big broom. We are all working together on that cleanup crew: men, women, MRAs, masculists, masculinists, activists, lobbyists, and non-feminists of every description in every part of the world. But I have suggested that women especially have a critical part in all of this, and the remainder of this talk will build purposefully, step by step, toward the role that women can or should play in the non-feminist revolution that is now gathering force around the planet. I would remind the women who are presently listening to these words to reflect upon what they stand to gain or to lose. This is not about men. It is about all of us. And if you are a woman, then all of us means you, if it means anything whatsoever. So please think about you, because you know that in a social ecology, what goes around comes around, and you know that in the end it always comes around to you, again and again. Now, cynics and such like philosophers will inform you that the nature of woman is mercenary. But is that really true? Mind you, I am not one to lose my composure when I hear a man talk that way. What do I look like, a feminist, that I should correct his opinion? After all, who can say what his experience has been, and who am I to make doubt of it? For it is possible, at least in theory, that he knows more of the world than I do. And I am far indeed from knowing all there is to know of the world. And yet, born skeptic that I am, I would no sooner doubt my own experience, and I have seen a fair bit that inspires me to think for myself. So I cannot bring myself to bar the broad gate of possibility without directing your attention to a wicket gate in the hedge just down the way. Assuredly, the world has no lack of mercenary women in it, as likewise mercenary men, and mercenary is as mercenary does. So in the end all will be manifested to the light of day. Is not that so? So I will forbear to pontificate abstractively about the so-called nature of woman. Rather, in a spirit of pragmatism, I am willing to let results speak for themselves. And let me tell you a little secret. I am something of a mercenary myself. I think we all have a drop or two of that blood nowadays. It's just the way things are. In an age where avenues of loyalty are apt to betray the loyalist without warning, how is it possible not to see the world through mercenary eyes upon occasion? Now, any good mercenary knows how to maximize his advantage, and knows which side his bread is buttered on. And my own mercenary instincts certainly do instruct me in all the needful wisdom of that sort. And I am trusting that you too possess those instincts. So, just between us mercenaries, a touch of renegade understanding is in the warrant. Wouldn't you say? Yes, I feel certain that critical numbers of women will know perfectly well in the present debacle which side their bread is buttered on. I am confident they will know to maximize their advantage and have the discreet intelligence to be governed by prudential considerations rather than empty loyalties to false friends, false values, false gods, or any other form of fool's gold. Some would declare that women are not capable of this, but I, for one, am willing to wager differently. I do not mean to suggest that the movement of men cannot succeed without female help. Men will mobilize on their own behalf, come what may, and the question is not whether they will succeed in their game. Rather, the question is whether they will succeed too well in the wrong way at the expense of women, and in the end give the world a feminism in reverse. If we desire to avoid the latter outcome, then the presence of non-feminist women is needful to the game of counter-feminist agitation. Men need to see dramatic evidence that women get it. Mind you, one does not expect miracles. If, let us say, the United States harbors a female population of 150 million, one does not anticipate that all or most of that number will rise up in unison for the cause. Luckily, no such turnout is needed, or anything close to it. For although we might be pessimistic about the numbers, let us consider the grounds for optimism. If only 2 or 3 million women and girls in the whole United States became counter-feminist agitators, that would be more than enough to put the game over the top. 2 or 3 million is a lot of people, enough to make a lot of noise, enough to send a clear message both to men and to the world at large. 2 or 3 million, that is all it would take. And to be honest, I am highballing when I offer that figure. 1 million, or even a bit less, would almost certainly do the trick. And so what then is the trick? It is to be smart, organized, passionate, aggressive, and full of energy. Quantity counts less than quality. To be frank, most people, men and women alike, are sheep, which is an impolite way of saying they are followers. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. Depending on the case, it can work either for you or against you. So the needful art, understandably enough, is to pilot this effect to the furtherance of your purposes. Yes, if you address them in a way they can understand, the broad mass of women will follow you. Or if not follow, at the very least, part the way for you and speak no word against you. The silent majority is not so much silent as inert. And being inert, they have inertia, which is always a developed quality, even a mercenary quality, you might say, since it can swing one way or the other. Another chauvinistic stereotype about women is that they understand only domestic morality. And here again, the field is wide open for any woman to demonstrate the contrary. But still, domestic morality is as important as public morality in its own way, and I wouldn't doubt that along with everything else, women understand domestic morality very well indeed. So remember that women are your constituency, and when you address them, you must appeal to them where they live. In practical terms, you must talk about their sons, their fathers, their brothers, their uncles, simply stated, their families, and especially the male members of their families for whom they cherish a familial affection. Remember that you are not talking about men in some abstract political way, but rather addressing the personal life of women precisely where it intersects with male life. Most women will perceive their rational self-interest to be invested in this realm, and if you want to reach them, you must start here. This is their social ecology. This, for them, is both personal and political. And here the feminists may think further upon their precept that the personal is the political, and finally eat those words with a touch more barbecue sauce than they'd like. I should in fairness add that many feminists do claim to care about their male family members. However, while I don't doubt that these persons are mentally convinced of their own sincerity, I cannot overlook the power of compartmentalization to anesthetize cognitive dissonance. The only way such a feminist can pretend to care about male family members in the teeth of feminist depredation toward men generally is to grow a flat spot in her brain which effectively blocks or filters out the mismatch between her fine sense of domestic morality on the one side and her blazing stupidity about public morality on the other. Also, I suspect that such women are practicing the "it can't happen here" brand of magical thinking. I would gladly wager that non-feminist women are not burdened by such mental deficiencies as sketched above, that they understand perfectly well how events in the public sphere can generate grievous consequences in the domestic sphere, and that they will apportion their care and concern in a manner befitting their intelligence. And this concludes Part 2 of the Open Message to Non-Feminist Women. The third and final part of this talk will be given in the recording which follows. Spielbogen. Out.